Sika sat by the fire pit in the crowded tent, the warmth of the flames struggling against the cold weight of dread in her chest. Around her, the hall buzzed with celebration, the air thick with the aroma of roasted meat. Laughter rang out loud, yet it felt distant. Her father, Chief Jabari of the Kamaji tribe, believed he had secured an alliance meant to give their people a home and protect them from war. For months, he had led them across the sea, their days spent aboard their ships, or in makeshift tents when they found land. War and drought had ravaged their once beautiful homeland, forcing them to leave. A month ago, they had arrived on the wild plains, a land known for its short but harsh winters and long, beautiful summers. Luckily for them, the tribe that lived here had a dwindling population and was willing to reach an agreement. Her people would be given a part of the land to live in as long as whatever was cultivated could be split between them and those of the wild plains. It was a decent bargain, but in order to solidify the alliance, they requested a political marriage, and so she was to be wed to Tagon, chief of the Wild Plains, as his third wife. Even though Sika knew this was the logical choice, her heart rebelled. She wanted to lead her people like her father and wield her sword to protect them. She also wanted a husband who would belong to her alone, but she would do anything for her people's peace and stability, even if it cost her her freedom. Sika had been allowed to spend a few days within the tribe to learn their customs before the wedding. Tomorrow, she was returning to her own people to prepare for the ceremony. Tonight's feast served both as a temporary farewell and a preliminary wedding celebration. However, Sika's real purpose of coming here had been to know what fate awaited her. Her gaze drifted to where Chief Tagon sat, surrounded by his council. He had barely acknowledged her all evening. Tagon was a man she did not know if she could ever come to love. He treated his wives with little kindness or respect. Suddenly feeling someone watching her, Sika scanned the crowd till her eyes found their target. Standing at the far corner of the tent was Kagan, Tagon's adopted brother. Tagon's father, the previous chief, had saved Kagan from starvation as a young boy, taking him in and treating him as a son. In turn, Kagan had become Tagon's fiercest protector, never leaving his side. Kagan's gaze was intense as he watched Sika through dark, expressionless eyes. She couldn't tell what he was thinking. Was it curiosity, or did he absolutely detest her? He looked away, and Sika let her gaze wander back to the fire pit. When she looked in his direction again, he was gone from the tent. She wondered what could be important enough to make Kagan leave Tagon's side. Tagon stood then, his massive frame towering above everyone. His loud voice silenced the laughter and music. Sika felt a shiver run down her spine as his cold gaze swept over the crowd, before settling on her. "To a prosperous future," he declared, raising his cup, "and to my new bride." He emptied the cup, and the hall erupted with cheers. Then, Tagon motioned to Sika, and she came over to him with a wine jug, pouring some wine into his cup. He had barely taken 2 sips when his hands began to tremble. Then he stumbled, struggling to keep his balance. His eyes widened in horror and disbelief. The cup fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. For a heartbeat, everyone stood frozen. Then Tagon crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Chaos erupted as warriors leapt to their feet, reaching for their weapons. Servants screamed, retreating from the fallen chief. Sika stood frozen in shock. The realization of what had happened struck her like a lightning bolt. Tagon had been poisoned. As the chaos quieted down, the crowd's gaze moved from Tagon's lifeless body to her. She realized what everyone was thinking. The foreign bride had killed their chief. She was the one who had served him the cup of wine. The murmurs grew louder and louder. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the confusion. "Brother?" It was Kagan. His usually expressionless eyes were wild with panic as he rushed to Tagon's side. As he gripped Tagon's lifeless body, panic turned to cold, numbing shock. His hands clenched into fists. "How did this happen?" he said with barely restrained fury. All eyes turned to Sika. Kagan's chilling gaze locked onto her. "I had nothing to do with this," she said, meeting his glare. "Kill her!" someone shouted. The crowd roared in agreement. Kagan silenced them with a single look. "Put her in the prison tent for now. I'll get to the bottom of this." One of the senior council members, Tuba, stepped forward. "Are you trying to protect a murderer?" Kagan held his gaze. "I want the truth." As Tagon's body was carried away, guards led Sika outside toward the prison tent. Sika wanted to protest, but knew she was outnumbered and could not risk further endangering her people by getting violent. She needed a plan. Back in the main tent, Toba eyed Kagan. "You were conveniently absent while the chief was murdered." Kagan frowned. "What are you trying to say?" Toba said nothing and walked away. But Kagan felt the questioning glances from those in the tent. He ignored them, just as he tried to ignore the overwhelming grief he was feeling. He needed to know who poisoned Tagon and why. Outside the prison tent, where Sika was tied up, a mob of young men gathered, intent on getting revenge for their chief. They got into a fight with the guards, and in the middle of the commotion, someone came into the tent, cut Sika's ropes, and led her outside. It was dark, and she couldn't see his face, but he handed her the reins of a horse and said, "Run!" Sika hesitated, but concluded she had no choice. If she stayed here, she probably wouldn't survive the night. By the time the guards realized what was happening, she was on the horse, speeding away from the camp. Some of the men ran to get their horses and chased her. Hearing the commotion, Kagan came out. Realizing what was happening, he ordered someone to get his horse and followed. Sika rode hard, cold air burning her lungs. Behind her, the pounding of hooves drew closer. Snow whipped across her face as she entered the frozen forest. Unfamiliar with the terrain, she didn't notice the cliff ahead. Her horse reared, throwing her forward, and she plummeted into darkness. Her pursuers reached the edge, peered down, and saw nothing but snow and jagged rocks. Satisfied, they returned to camp. At the bottom, Sika lay still. A tree and deep snow had broken her fall. Even so, she wouldn't last long in the cold. As darkness crept in and her eyes closed, her only regret was failing her people. Sika awoke in a cave to crackling fire, and a fur draped over her. She was alive. She blinked, her vision clearing. Partially hidden by shadows, a man sat sharpening a blade. He didn't look at her, but she knew that silhouette. "Kagan," she whispered. "You should be dead," Kagan said, ignoring the tightness in his chest at the sound of his name on her lips. Sika forced herself to sit upright, wincing at the pain. "Why did you save me?" Kagan felt a fresh wave of grief and anger. "To find out why you killed my brother." Sika took a deep breath. "I told you, I had nothing to do with Tagon's death. Do you think I'd be foolish enough to risk my people's lives? What would I gain?" Kagan hesitated. When he found her half buried in snow, the same question had haunted him. Why would she kill Tagon, knowing she and her people would likely not survive the aftermath? Finally, he said, "Then why did you escape and who helped you?" "The horse stables are nowhere near the prison tent. Someone must have prepared a horse for you in advance." Sika's mind pored over the blurry events of the night. "There was a mob trying to kill me. Did you expect me to just stand there and watch?" "About the horse, someone cut my ropes and handed it to me. I couldn't see his face." Kagan scoffed. "You expect me to believe that?" Sika was running out of patience. "Don't act like I'm the only suspicious one here. Why did you just happen to be absent when Tagon was poisoned?" Sika regretted the words as soon as she spoke them. Kagan had just lost his brother and was still grieving. "Are you suggesting that I killed my brother? I really should have let you freeze to death," Sika sighed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Save your explanations for the council," Kagan said, turning away. Sika's eyes widened. "You can't take me back there. I won't survive for long." Kagan hated to admit it, but she was right. "What do you suggest then?" "I can help you find the real culprit." Kagan raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to do that? Your father's help? Don't even think about returning home. The council will send word to him." Sika sighed. "I can't risk involving him directly. Have you heard of Hasir the sailor?" Kagan was surprised she knew the man. He was rumored to have connections within and beyond the Wild Plains, and could get almost any information. Sika continued, seeing that Kagan recognized the name. "Our fleet saved him from a pirate attack, and he was the one who suggested my people move here. He will help me for my father's sake. He lives in a settlement not far away. If anyone can get us a clue about what happened that night, it's him." Kagan considered her words and finally accepted, thinking he must be crazy. "Very well, Sika, we'll head there in the morning." She gave him a weak smile, oddly pleased to hear him say her name. Kagan studied her, still unsure if he could trust her. If she was lying, he would be the one to end this himself, but a part of him really hoped she was innocent. The next morning, Sika woke to the smell of meat roasting over the fire. Kagan wrapped some meat in leaves and handed it to her without speaking. She had barely eaten anything at the feast the night before, so she was grateful for the meal. Hasir lived in the eastern encampment, a place he preferred because it was quieter than the main camp where the chief resided. With all the snow, it would have been nearly impossible for Sika to find her way there alone. But Kagan could probably navigate it with his eyes closed. When she finished eating, Kagan turned to her. "Let's get moving. We need to cover as much ground as possible before nightfall." He slipped an arm under her elbow and helped her to her feet. Though relieved that no bones were broken, Sika winced with every step. "You might have to go on without me," she murmured. "I'll only slow you down." Giving her an amused smile, Kagan whistled, and a horse came trotting toward them. "You didn't think I ran all the way here, did you?" Relief flooded Sika, and she finally allowed herself to smile. She tried to mount the horse, but was hit with a jolt of pain. Kagan lifted her by the waist onto the saddle, surprising her. Once she was seated comfortably, he climbed on behind her and urged the horse forward. The cold bit at Sika's skin as the horse trudged through the snow-covered forest, but Kagan seemed unfazed. Eventually, the rhythmic motion lulled her to sleep. When she began to slump forward in the saddle, Kagan gently shifted her to lean against him, trying to ignore the pounding of his heart as her head nestled under his chin. The horse came to a sudden stop, ears perked. The motion woke Sika, and she flushed with embarrassment, realizing she had fallen asleep on Kagan's chest. But when she looked up at him, he was tense, his eyes scanning the trees. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Someone's following us," he said, sliding down from the horse. "Show yourself," he called out. 3 men stepped out of the bushes, and Kagan recognized them as his clansmen. "You traitor!" one of them shouted. "The maid who poisoned the chief's wine has confessed. You instructed her to do it." Kagan blinked in confusion. "What? We didn't want to believe it, but here you are with the woman who helped poison our chief." Sika slid down from the horse and stood beside Kagan. "I've already made it clear I had nothing to do with Chief Tagon's death. I'll prove my innocence by finding the real culprit." The men drew their blades. "Explain yourself to the council. You're coming with us, both of you." Kagan stepped protectively in front of her. "Go back and tell the council I'll return after avenging Tagon. I don't want to fight you." But it was too late. The men charged. Kagan reacted swiftly, dodging their strikes and countering with quick blows, aiming to knock them out without killing them. With 2 men down, the last lunged at Sika. Kagan turned in panic, only to see her knock the man out with the butt of her dagger. He was impressed she could still fight in her condition. "Not bad, Sika. Are you all right?" She nodded. "I'm fine. Thank you." They quickly covered their tracks and rode faster, hoping to gain as much ground as possible. As night approached, they stopped for a few hours' rest. As they dismounted, Kagan moved stiffly, and Sika noticed the blood-stained slash on his cloak. "Kagan, you're hurt!" she exclaimed, eyes filled with worry. "It's nothing. I've taken worse hits," he said, moving to build a makeshift shelter. That night, as they huddled beneath the shelter, Sika moved to kneel beside him, her fingers brushing his side. He flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "Let me see," she said, her voice firm but gentle. Kagan hesitated, then slowly removed his cloak. Sika set to work, cleaning the gash and wrapping it tightly with strips of cloth. When she finished, she leaned back and met his gaze. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You don't have to help me." Kagan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I won't see you die for something you didn't do." Sika's eyes widened. Did this mean he finally believed her? Kagan continued, "Besides, helping you means finding out who harmed Tagon. And now, apparently, I'm just as much a fugitive as you, so don't thank me." A few hours later, they set off again on horseback and arrived at Hasir's tent before sunrise. "Hasir, it's me, Sika, daughter of Chief Jabari," she called softly. The flap opened, and frail hands pulled them in. Hasir looked both upset and relieved to see Sika, but glared at Kagan. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You'll get me in trouble. Everyone is looking for you. And why would you bring this man?" "I've missed you too, Grandpa Hasir," Sika joked. That seemed to calm him, and she told him the full story. Hasir thought for a moment before speaking. He had already begun investigating. From what he knew, a mercenary named Baskir had secretly met with a council member 2 weeks earlier and was spotted near the main encampment on the night of the celebration. Also, sometime last week, Baskir had gotten drunk and boasted that he'd be rich after Chief Tagon's feast. Kagan clenched his fist. A council member? He had suspected many, but never imagined it would be a council member. Each of them was like a father or brother to Tagon. Sika rested a hand on his arm. "It's okay, Kagan. We'll bring them to justice." He relaxed slightly at her touch and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Hasir's eyes darted mischievously from Kagan to Sika. Sika ignored him and turned to Kagan, a thought crossing her mind. "Why did you leave the tent that night?" Kagan sighed. "One of the men caught a spy snooping near a supply tent. I didn't want to bother Tagon, so I went to check it out. When I got there, the spy had escaped. Before I could react, I heard the commotion and ran back. Now that he said it aloud, it all made sense." Sika voiced what he was thinking. "Someone wanted you away, so it would be easy to blame you for Tagon's death." Kagan nodded. "But why me? It's not like I would become chief. Tagon has 4 sons. Unless, Sika pressed. Unless they feared I'd become regent. None of the boys are of age, and someone would need to make the important decisions. So, the mastermind wants to be regent," Sika finished. Kagan looked at her softly. This meant she was just a victim caught in the middle of his clan's internal strife. He felt ashamed. Hasir cut in. "All right, that's enough, you two. Now that you've figured it out, what's your plan?" "To find this Baskir before he disappears," Kagan said, and Sika nodded in agreement. Hasir told them that Baskir had a scar across his face and lived alone on the outskirts, a few hours away. Sika entrusted Hasir with a letter to her father, letting him know she was safe and telling him not to get involved. Then she thanked Hasir, saying she owed him a debt, but Hasir waved her off. "Pay me by staying alive." Sika and Kagan rode off at sunset. As they approached Baskir's hideout, they dismounted and walked softly to avoid detection. But suddenly, they were surrounded by 4 men, led by a tall, muscular man with a scar across his face. Baskir. "Well, well," Baskir sneered. "I've been looking for you, and here you are at my doorstep." "Who paid you to kill Tagon?" Kagan asked. Baskir laughed. "I don't know what you mean. I heard he was poisoned by his loyal brother and the Kamaji bride." Sika seethed at the mention of her tribe. Now almost fully recovered, she drew her dagger, ready to fight. Kagan wielded his blade. In a flash, Baskir's men attacked. Kagan and Sika fought side by side, not holding back this time. But these mercenaries were skilled. By the time only Baskir remained, both Kagan and Sika were bleeding from multiple wounds. They attacked Baskir together, but he was even more skilled than his men. His blade came dangerously close to striking Sika, and Kagan moved without thinking. He threw himself between her and the blade. It pierced him, and he fell to the ground. "Kagan!" Sika screamed. She turned and drove her dagger through Baskir's shoulder, pinning him to a tree. "This wound isn't yet fatal," she said to Baskir through gritted teeth as he gasped for breath. "But if you don't tell me what you know, I'll make sure you breathe your last." Fear filled Baskir's eyes. He confessed that he didn't know the man's identity because he always wore a hood, but he was sure he was a senior council member because he had once caught a glimpse of the man's council ring. The man also had a deep scar running up his right arm. The man had known Kagan wouldn't let them kill Sika without investigating and had arranged her escape, knowing Kagan would go after her. During that time, the maid would confess. And with Kagan's absence and his protection of Sika, no one would believe him upon his return. Sika's heart sank. Kagan rescuing her had provided an even better outcome for the mastermind. Without Baskir's confession, Kagan would have no way to clear his name. Suddenly remembering that he hadn't moved since falling, Sika ran to Kagan's side and dropped to her knees, pressing her hands against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, Kagan," she begged, tears forming. "Don't you dare die on me. We found the truth. We can avenge your brother." Kagan gave her a weak nod, his gaze fixed on her beautiful black eyes. Smiling faintly, he said, "Don't cry. Now you can prove your innocence. Your clan will be safe." His words made her tears fall harder. The thought of returning to her old life without him felt unbearable. As blood seeped through her clothing, Sika felt her strength fading too. Clutching Kagan's limp body tightly, she surrendered to the darkness. Sika awoke with a jolt, her body aching. She lay on furs in a dim cave, the flickering fire casting shadows on the stone walls. As her eyes adjusted, panic rose. Kagan was nowhere in sight. Images of him bleeding in the snow rushed back. "Kagan?" Her voice cracked as she struggled to sit up. "Kagan!" she called again, more desperately this time. A figure appeared at the entrance, and her heart nearly stopped. Kagan walked in, slowly clutching his side, his face pale. Without thinking, Sika rushed to him and threw her arms around him. "You're alive!" Kagan winced in pain, and she quickly loosened her grip. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He held her trembling hands. "Why did you get up? You shouldn't be moving. You could reopen your wounds." He scanned her for signs of bleeding, then gently carried her back to the furs and laid her down. "Are you really okay?" Sika asked. "I was afraid you were..." Her voice faltered. "I'm fine," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then her eyes widened. "What about Baskir? Did he get away?" Kagan laughed, seeing that she was just remembering something so important. He's bound in the next cave. The others are watching him." "Others? Who?" Sika asked. "Remember those lovely clansmen who attacked us a few days ago?" Kagan said sarcastically. Sika nodded, and Kagan continued. "They were nearby and overheard Baskir's confession. After we passed out, they captured Baskir, patched us up, and brought us here. They'll also escort us back in a few days." "Escort us back where?" Sika asked, worried. "To the next council meeting. We'll take Baskir with us and expose the traitor. There's only one person who fits the description he gave. Tuoba. It makes sense. He never liked the idea of us aligning with your tribe." Sika noticed Kagan suddenly grew quiet, avoiding her eyes. "What is it?" she asked. "I know you sent word to your father not to get involved, but the council threatened him with your life. He's already on his way to the main camp. If Toba turns the council against him, he could be captured, and this could spark a war between our tribes." Seeing her grim expression, Kagan placed his hands gently on her shoulder. "It's all right, Sika. You're not alone. We'll stop him together." Her expression softened. "Kagan, why did you take that blade from me? I know you've been protecting me to keep the peace between our clans, but you could have died." He hesitated. He wanted to say it was just an impulse, but the truth was, he'd do it all over again. Somehow, she had come to mean everything to him. Kagan stepped closer. "Sika, protecting you is my choice, and it's not just for the sake of peace." Sika's eyes widened as she took in the meaning behind his words. Kagan once again found himself lost in her beautiful black eyes. His gaze lingered on her lips, and he leaned in. Just as Sika's eyes closed expectantly, the sound of footsteps broke the moment. The soldier who had entered the cave froze at the sight of them. "Apologies," the man said quickly, eyes wide. "I didn't mean to interrupt. Are you feeling better, Lady Sika?" She cleared her throat, face flushed. "Yes, thank you." The soldier glanced between them awkwardly. "We'll leave in a few days. Should be enough time to reach the council meeting. Also, I'm sorry for attacking you earlier. Thanks for only knocking us out." Sika and Kagan chuckled. That fight already felt like a lifetime ago. Together, they began planning. The Kamaji camp was far away, so if they moved quickly, they might reach the council before Chief Jabari arrived and save him from being falsely accused. The day of the council meeting arrived. The main tent was thick with tension as Tuoba stood at the center, voice booming. "We must eliminate the Kamajis," he declared. "Tagon is dead. Kagan has been bewitched by the Kamaji woman. They want to take what is ours, but as regent, I will lead us to victory." Some council members nodded. Others hesitated, still unsettled by Tagon's unsolved death. Suddenly, commotion erupted outside. The tent flaps flew open, and all eyes turned toward the entrance as Sika and Kagan strode in. "Tuoba!" Sika shouted. "You killed Tagon!" Gasps echoed. Tuoba's face paled before twisting into a smug grin. "Why would I do that? Trying to save yourself by blaming me," he sneered, then shouted, "Seize them!" But before anyone could move, Baskir was dragged in, chained by 3 guards. Kagan stepped forward. "As brother of the late chief, I accuse you of plotting his murder, of manipulating this council, and trying to start a war for your own gain." The guards shoved Baskir forward. He stumbled to the ground and admitted to the council that he had been paid by Tuoba for the assassination. The council members were thrown into confusion, their voices clashing in anger and panic. But Tuoba had come prepared. He whistled and armed men filled the tent. A battle broke out. Sika drew her sword, and Kagan joined her, the 2 of them side by side. Blood dripped from their old wounds, but they fought fiercely. Kagan spotted Tuoba, and their blades met with a resounding clash. Kagan fought with the precision of a true warrior. Soon he disarmed Tuoba and struck him down. Tuoba gasped in pain and shock as he collapsed to his knees and was restrained by guards. The council would decide his fate, which was no doubt an execution. When Tuoba's followers saw that he had been captured, they fled and were pursued by the guards. Kagan looked across the room in time to see Sika slay the last of her opponents. They had won. The threat was over. Sika sheathed her sword and walked in his direction. Kagan's heart clenched as she approached, her smile making everything else fade into the background. Was this it? Would he really never see her again? "You're free now," he said quietly as she reached him, his voice tinged with both relief and sorrow. "After all you've been through, the council will probably grant your people land without the marriage alliance." "What about you?" Sika asked, eyes locked on him. "If the council allows it, I'll serve as regent," Kagan replied solemnly. There was a long pause. Then Sika spoke. "You never finished what you were saying. In the cave." Kagan remembered how close he had come to confessing his feelings, and he flushed. "So?" Sika said, gently nudging him. Her gaze held an unspoken invitation. Could he dare hope? He pushed the thought away and shook his head. He couldn't ask her to give up her freedom again. Sika rolled her eyes. "Silly man," she murmured. She stepped closer to him and said, "Kagan, all my life, my one goal has been to protect my people. When I was passed out in the snow before you saved me, my only fear was that I had failed my people. But when I watched you nearly die in my arms, what I feared the most was never seeing you again." Kagan stared at her, stunned. "Now, do you have anything to say to me?" Sika asked again. Before he could stop himself, Kagan pulled Sika into a hug and whispered, "Stay, Sika, please. I need you." Sika blinked in surprise at his raw honesty. Realizing what he had just confessed, Kagan stepped back and added, "You don't have to. I know you value your freedom, and I wouldn't ask you to." Sika cut him off by giving him a kiss on his cheek. Then she threw her arms around his neck, laughing. Still in disbelief, Kagan held her tightly as though he feared she might slip away. A loud cough broke the moment. They had forgotten they weren't alone. The stunned council members were staring at them, and at the tent entrance was Chief Jabari. Sika ran excitedly into her father's embrace. He hugged her tightly, then turned to Kagan, eyes narrowing. As things quieted down, the council formally apologized and offered the Kamaji's land with no strings attached. But Sika surprised them all. "I'll honor the marriage alliance," she said. "On one condition. My husband must be Kagan." Chief Jabari scowled at Kagan, but when Sika looked at him with pleading eyes, he relented. The council members accepted this arrangement. Kagan was also named regent for the next 5 years. As the tent emptied, Chief Jabari prepared to take Sika with him. She would return close to the wedding day. He stepped outside to give Sika a moment with Kagan. Kagan gently took Sika's hand, already missing her, even though she was right there. He consoled himself with the fact that she would soon be his wife. It still seemed like a dream. He needed to know for sure. Sika, I want more than anything to have you by my side forever. But are you sure this is what you want? Sika didn't answer, but pulled him into a kiss that shattered every doubt he had. Kagan returned the kiss, his heart swelling with emotions he hadn't dared to feel before. As they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard, his heart racing. I love you, Sika, he whispered. And I love you, Kagan, Sika replied, snuggled in his embrace. Another cough came from outside the tent. Chief Jabari, no doubt. Reluctantly, Kagan let her go, and she departed with her father. Not long after, they were married in a grand ceremony with both clans in attendance. 5 years later, Kagan stepped down as regent, and Tagon's first son became chief. He and Sika spent their days traveling with their children and enjoying the freedom they both deeply desired.